Sergey couldn't even imagine that his wife Olga could do something like that, abandon her own child. She did it. She left, writing on a scrap of paper and sticking it to the fridge. "I'm fed up with everything. This is your child, so raise him yourself, and don't even look for me." He came home from work, and in the courtyard, neighbor Nikitishna was sitting on a bench by the entrance, holding his daughter in her arms. Well, she saw Sergey and said, "All right, Seryoja, I looked after her, now it's up to you," and left. Sergey didn't even have time to ask where Olga was. Only at home did he read her note. He clutched his head, not knowing what to do. Then all sorts of thoughts crept in about an orphanage where he could give her up. But no, he wouldn't send his daughter there. He knew all too well what an orphanage was like. He'd been there until the boarding school, and the boarding school was just like the orphanage. Sergey remembered how he always stood in line as a little boy, peering into the eyes of those who came to choose children for themselves, but no one ever picked Sergey. He had strabismus. He fixed it when he earned the money for the operation himself, at 18 already. But for a long time after, he walked around trying not to look strangers in the face. It's not that they bullied Sergey in the orphanage or boarding school, but how he longed to just live in a home with parents. And now what? Send her there? No way. But what would they live on? He couldn't leave her alone at home while he was at work. He could ask Nikitishna to babysit once or twice, but she was already old. Sergey saw how often the ambulance came for her. But still. And what about work now, with a 2-year-old daughter on his hands? And what to live on? Then he fed Nina milk, washed her, changed her, and put her to bed, while he kept thinking. Then someone rang the doorbell. It was Nikitishna. She brought a pot with mashed potatoes and 2 cutlets. She said, "Eat yourself and feed Nina, and don't despair. I heard that a father can also take maternity leave. Some law like that came out. So take it, and I'll help watch her while you sort out the paperwork. And forgive me if I'm butting in, but don't regret that your Olga ran away. She was no mother and a lousy wife too. You just didn't notice, you fool. Anyway, live on, Seryoja. You're not alone. You have Nina." All night, Sergey thought about it, and decided to try. When he went to the foreman the next day and said he was going to apply for paternity leave, the guy even choked on the tea he'd just started drinking. Then he listened, swore harshly at Olga, and helped, telling him where to start. "Then you'll send your daughter to kindergarten," he said. "I'll help with that. We'll find a spot. Then you can come back to work. But I'm afraid you won't be able to take night shifts anymore. And you dreamed of your own apartment to move out of the rental. I get it, Sergey, but that's how things are now. More important." And so Sergey was a nursing dad until the end of his leave, as they teasingly called him in the brigade. They sympathized with him and respected him for not giving his daughter to an orphanage, but raising her himself. Then Nina went to kindergarten. By then, Sergey had learned to braid her hair and tie bows. He cooked lunches himself, kept the apartment clean, but spent all his time with Nina. For a long time, she didn't know the word mom. There was no one to call that. But she had a dad. He told her fairy tales and played dolls with her, and Nina grew up as a little helper. She tried to put cups from the table into the sink, broke plates, cheap ones, but Sergey didn't scold Nina. He said she'd learn. And in kindergarten, she asked to be put on duty, and they did. The teachers and nannies knew Sergey was raising his daughter alone, and the girl was always clean and neat, so they respected Sergey in the kindergarten. That's why Nina grieved when her dad got married, and a new daughter, a year older than Nina, appeared along with the wife. Sergey met Natasha in the children's clinic. Nina got sick, nothing serious, but she had a high fever for 3 days. First, Sergey called a doctor home, then gave her medicine as the doctor ordered. On the 4th day, he went to the appointment with Nina at the clinic. There, he saw a young, pretty woman trying to unfasten the buckle on a child's shoe. Next to her stood a crying girl, maybe a bit older than Nina. Well, Sergey helped with the buckle. When they came back for Nina's certificate that she could go back to kindergarten, he saw that woman and girl again at the bus stop. They started talking. Turns out they had just gotten a similar certificate too. Then they rode the trolley bus together and agreed that closer to evening, they'd take the girls to the park to ride the donkeys.
Soon, Natasha and Sergey started dating. Natasha's previous husband ran away when he became a father. Natasha immediately liked Sergey. She was nothing like Olga, and Sergey liked her, so they decided to live together. They got married. Natasha had her own small apartment. Sergey and Nina moved there, and right away Nina's eyes were teary. She saw that Dad wasn't just playing with her, not just taking her to the park, but taking that Liza too. And Liza started calling Dad, Dad, and he didn't mind. He even seemed to like it. Nina liked Aunt Natasha, but not her daughter Liza. It wasn't jealousy toward Liza, but why did she call her dad Dad too? Nina didn't call Liza's mom Mom, so she didn't want to play with her and wouldn't give her dolls. Liza cried and ran to complain, and now Dad started scolding Nina, saying you can't be greedy, and Aunt Natasha told her they were sisters, that they needed to share, but she wiped Liza's tears and kissed her. At first, Aunt Natasha kissed Nina too when saying goodnight. Then Nina started pretending to be asleep. Let her kiss her own Liza. Dad would kiss her. But now Dad came home from work so late that only Aunt Natasha waited for him. And she told them Dad works a lot to buy the girls new dresses and ride attractions. And soon maybe they'd have a big apartment where Liza would have her own room and Nina her own. They just had to wait and let Dad rest. Nina understood that because of these Natashas and Lizas, she hardly saw Dad anymore. She couldn't remember when he last told her a bedtime story. She didn't need a separate room. She wanted to live like before, with Dad in one room. Nina started constantly pestering Dad, crying, saying she missed him, asking to go back to the old apartment. She saw this didn't please Aunt Natasha, but it didn't please Dad either. He could snap, "Nina, stop whining. I'm tired, and here you are with your nonsense." Then, thanks to Natasha, it got calmer. Nina grieved less. Sometimes, when walking with kids in the yard, she could say that her mom braided her hair so nicely. In short, relations gradually settled. But due to Sergey's chronic fatigue, he worked a lot trying to earn for an apartment so they wouldn't all be crammed in this tiny Khrushchevka on top of each other. He became irritable and paid less and less attention to Natasha and the girls. Nina felt this especially. She started getting up as early as possible to see Dad off to work. She got offended when she realized he'd already left. This sometimes drove Natasha crazy too. Natasha was spinning like a squirrel in a wheel. Work, home, 2 kids, an always tired husband. Now they quarreled more often, blurting out their grievances in the heat of the moment. Each thought they were the one carrying the unbearable load. In short, the atmosphere was heating up fast, and the kids added their bit. Quarrels over toys, over who Dad paid more attention to, though Natasha saw he paid attention to no one, not her, not the girls. And Natasha knew it wasn't another woman. Sergey didn't have one. It was hopelessness. Still, Natasha tried to preserve the scraps of good they had. Natasha had someone to compare Sergey to. The biological father of Liza wasn't worth his pinky. But Natasha's nerves weren't made of steel, and she was scared that if it continued like this, the family would fall apart. Natasha remembered when she especially acutely felt like a truly abandoned woman over such a seemingly small thing, but how she cried then, hiding behind a tree in the park. It was on the eve of March 8. At work, the male colleagues congratulated them, giving everyone identical thermoses and mimosa. But some women also got gifts from husbands or boyfriends. Not Natasha. She was already divorced, and her ex-husband, Liza's father, couldn't be found by the enforcement order for alimony. He never paid once. She tried her best so her daughter wasn't dressed worse than others, bought her sweets at least once a week, and for holidays managed to buy a new toy. herself had forgotten the way to the beauty salon and bought nothing new for herself. But it turned out there was something else. That festive evening, Natasha was going home. She was in a hurry. She still had to hide the new doll to congratulate Liza on March 8.
Tomorrow, then run to pick her up from kindergarten for the matinee. Natasha couldn't make the matinee. They wouldn't let her off work, so the doll would at least soften her daughter's offense a bit. But that was tomorrow. Natasha stood on the back platform of the trolley bus, preparing to exit the next stop, and she saw a young man getting off, followed by a young woman firmly holding a 4-year-old boy's hand. Getting off the trolley bus, the man lifted the boy off the steps and said to him, "Let's give our mom a hand. That's what a man should always do, and you're our man." The boy took on an important look, and now 2 hands reached out to the young woman getting off, the strong, reliable hand of her husband and the little palm of the boy who would grow up and help his woman too. From this simple, everyday scene for many, Natasha felt dizzy. She didn't have that, and Liza would never lean on a reliable dad's hand. That's when Natasha's hysteria started. She managed to hide it, ran to a tree and hid behind it, but that feeling of an offended, deprived of male attention woman didn't go away. Natasha remembered with what pride she got off the trolley bus when she, Sergey, and the kids went to the circus. He got off first, took the girls from her one by one, held them with one hand and helped Natasha with the other, and she wanted everyone to see that her husband and the girls' father was offering hands to her, Liza, and Nina. When they moved away from the stop, Natasha kissed Sergey, and he didn't understand where the impulse came from. But now everything was different. Everyone's nerves were taut like strings. The kids felt everything. Natasha felt sorry for Nina. She understood why she was prickly like a hedgehog. But Natasha tried so hard. This little one who didn't know her birth mother wasn't indifferent to her. And this constant lack of money, Sergey worked till he dropped, but still at the same job with the same salary. He didn't stop thinking about his own big apartment. Because of this cramped space, he couldn't even rest properly. Natasha got tired too. So much she wanted to lock herself in the bathroom and not open the door to anyone. And every day, check homework, prepare clothes for everyone, scrape together money for school lunches, pack lunch for Sergey. Natasha knew her husband didn't eat in the cafeteria. He saved money on himself. And the work was physical, hard. In winter, outside, freezing. In summer, outside, no shade. Natasha understood how tired Sergey was, and he understood she was tired too. Now another worry. Liza and Nina were taken into a drama club. They're preparing their first performance. Costumes are on the parents, sets too. And they need to figure out what to make those costumes from, and rehearse every evening with Liza and Nina so they don't forget their lines. When to rehearse? Good thing tomorrow's a day off. Cleaning, laundry, then rehearsal in the morning. Sergey won't be home anyway, he has side work. He says he and 2 guys took on building a garage and the client promised extra for urgency. In the morning, Nina, without taking off her pajamas, catches up to Sergey at the front door and says, "Daddy, don't go, I have a serious talk for you. I want to tell you." "Nina, not now," Sergey only glanced at his daughter briefly. "I'm in a hurry, tell me later." He slams the door and leaves. Didn't even take his backpack. Nothing to do, thinks Natasha, and goes to call the girls for breakfast. Reminds them that after breakfast is rehearsal. At the bus stop, Sergey notices he forgot his backpack at home, with all his necessary tools. He turns back. His mood is awful, but he tries not to slam the door. But what does he hear? And peeking into the slightly open room door, what does he see? Natasha is sitting and scolding Nina. She says, "Give back the gingerbread right now. It's not for you, it's for my daughter. You're a stepdaughter, you hear? Give it back now." And Liza claps her hands and almost sings, "My gingerbread, mine. Mom gives me gingerbread. You're some stepdaughter." Sergey's vision darkened. Is this true, Natasha? Is this how she treats his daughter? And his Nina is a stepdaughter? A burden to her? Sergey silently picks up his daughter, kisses her, and says, "Forgive me, Nina. We're leaving this house right now." Nina begs him, "Daddy, wait, listen.
I'll tell you everything on the way. Dress now, we're leaving, and no one will hurt you anymore. He goes to the kitchen, drinks a glass of water, 1, 2, it feels like Sergey can't breathe. How much has his Nina endured? And how Natasha pretended? And how is she better than Olga? Natasha comes into the kitchen and behind her both girls. Nina clings to Natasha and says, "Dad, why are you scolding Mom Natasha?" Mom Natasha sounded like mockery now, and Natasha says, "Wait, I'll explain everything." And Natasha tells that they're rehearsing the fairy tale Morozko. That's the performance they'll put on at school for parents. And Natasha had already told him that Liza and Nina are in it, and Nina even has the main role. And here both girls laugh and say, "We don't even like gingerbread." Natasha just smiled and continued, "You work a lot, but the price for your work is too high. You don't see us. You come home only to sleep. And I understand you, you're tired. I understand because I miss you. And do you guess how Nina misses you?" Liza interrupts Natasha, "Dad, I miss you too. Both Nina and I miss you." How could he think that about Natasha? How could he think she's even worse than Olga? And what to do now? How to ask forgiveness? Sergey stands, leaning his forehead against the cold window glass, and doesn't know what to do. He only understands that everything could have collapsed right now. Sergey remembers what he went through when Olga ran away, and the first thing he reminds himself is that Natasha is not Olga. Then he remembers that just now Nina called her mom, and Liza has long called him dad. That's what
A family is, and that things are hard now, it's his fault. Not so much because he can't earn a lot, but because he stopped asking how the day went for Natasha and the girls. No matter how tired, he needs to find the strength to communicate. And Natasha was always ready for that. Does she get less tired? Sergey goes out to the stairwell and calls his partner, says he has force majeure, asks to work without him today. The guy believed him. Sergey never skipped work without a good reason. Having sorted work, Sergey returns to the room. On the couch, snuggled up to Natasha, the girls sit and continue rehearsing a scene from the performance. Seeing him, they fall silent, and Sergey says, "Forgive me. I promise it won't happen again. Forgive me, Natasha, my good daughters, Nina and Liza. Forgive me, and allow me to go with you to watch your performance." Nina jumps up and approaches him. "That's what I wanted to tell you this morning. That was my important talk." Sergey scratches the back of his head and then says, "Natasha, go change then. The parents of the two main actresses should be dressed to the nines. And after the premiere, we need to thank the best actresses with pastries and cake." Late in the evening, when the happy girls fall asleep, Natasha and Sergey will talk long about every little thing that makes up their family life. Sergey will do most of the talking. He'll name all his mistakes that almost turned into tragedy. Natasha will listen without interrupting and say, "So you remember and knew where you were wrong. Then why—" "Don't answer. I'll answer. You worked yourself to the bone, and saving for an apartment wasn't working, and you lumped our misfortunes and your bad luck into one pile. But I'm guilty too. I should have guessed and not let you work to exhaustion. For some reason, I believe you'll have a good job and good salary. That means we'll have a big apartment. But until we do, let's come to this apartment like to our home. If they love those who live in it, indifference doesn't come. And leave work troubles at the door. I'm saying this to myself too, Seriosha." Already a month later, Sergey comes home and shouts from the threshold, "Everyone, family council!" And they all go to the kitchen. They guess something important happened, and Sergey tells. The owner of the garage that their small brigade built under Sergey's leadership offered them to create their own small construction firm for now. Said he'd help with equipment, used but working. Workfront, a garage cooperative in one micro-district from scratch to turnkey, including wiring. And they need to give an answer, agree or not. "What do you say?" he asks, looking around at his girls. "Well, probably need some, what's it called, startup capital?" asks Natasha. "Need it, and without a loan, no way. But not too much money needed, we have a preliminary calculation." "Seryoja, I'm for it," says Natasha. "You sure about the guys?" "Sure. Sergey is really sure about them."
Only for half a year, maybe a year, no new clothes for us, and rarely to attractions. Well, Mom, we'll figure that out, but we'll have enough, then we'll catch up and overtake. What about you girls? Only we have conditions. Liza even stood up from her chair. Nina rose after her. Can we take the kitten living on the stairs under the radiator? Natasha exchanges glances with Sergey. Both didn't expect such a condition, but they don't have time to answer because Liza says, "We already thought of a name." "Yeah," Nina said. "His name is Morozko." Unable to hold back, she interrupts, "Morozko!" Sergey and the girls went for the kitten, and Natasha was already setting up a bed from a thick cardboard box and an old mohair scarf, found 2 bowls for water and food, and Sergey, grumbling a bit, gives Morozko his plastic container, then goes outside for sand. But you have to teach the kitten where yes, and where the toilet is. When in 5 years their family moves into a new 3-room apartment, Morozko will enter first. Natasha said it's such a tradition for the house to be peaceful and happy, and the cat, not a kitten anymore but a solid cat, importantly walked through all the rooms, the kitchen, bathroom, balcony, and loggia, and seemed satisfied like the whole happy family.